Hey, it's Vanessa Vaughn at the Crisis Corner Cafe. I am the founder and chief resilience officer of Asfalis Advisors. And I'm here today just to have an informal video chat about a couple of crises that are happening in the news and to really just share our thoughts, what we think, but also more importantly, to get your thoughts and your perspectives as members of the public, as well as business owners, entrepreneurs, and companies. How can you take these situations that are happening in the news and learn from them? So the one that we're going to talk about today is the Jussie Smollett situation with the Empire Fox TV show. And I always like beginning with the end in mind. I first want to give a special shout out to the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and Business Insider. Those are typically the three articles that I read. That way I get a clear perspective and they do a really good job of minimizing the opinions that happen throughout the course of these events. So I'm not going to really spend too much time on Jussie Smollett. I'm really going to spend time more on Empire and Fox TV show because it's really from a business perspective that I want to bring this conversation to the table. And so beginning with the end in mind, in March, the Empire TV show, the first new episode to air following the arrest of Jussie Smollett, ratings were down drastically, and they were down even by 13% compared to the last episode in December of 2018. So, what happened? So, at the end of the day, in late January, Jussie Smollett filed a police report due to an attack that he experienced. 3 days later, he publicly addressed the media and general members of the public. The day after that, he performed at a sold-out concert. And by mid-February, the Chicago Police Department asked for his phone records, and they stated that his records were limited and redacted. Additionally, the two brothers who were suspects in that case were detained for questioning that same week. The suspects were released without charges. So that was pretty interesting and creates a bit of a twist. And these are things that kind of happen in times of a crisis, right? Where something happens that completely shifts the direction of where the conversation is going. And then next thing you know, you have a lot of new developments. And that's what's happened in this particular case. Also, within that time frame, Kim Fox, the state attorney, recused herself from the investigation. Immediately after that, Jussie was criminally charged for filing a false police report, and he turned himself in the next day, which would have been February 21st. By February 22nd, his character was written off for the season, and a week later, he was charged with 16 felonies. That's quite an amount of felonies there. A week later, he pleaded not guilty, and then 2 weeks after that, all charges were dropped. So what's unique about this situation is there's so many shifts and twists and turns, and it's been a challenge of really understanding, well, what's the truth and what's not the truth. And so in the latest developments, Chicago issued a bill demanding that Jussie pay in upwards of $130,000 to cover the costs for police, their overtime, and what they spent managing that entire situation. And just within the past week, civil action was threatened as a result of him not paying those charges back. So now that we understand a bit of the context, and I'll leave some articles down below the video so that you guys can go through and do your own readings. Two questions that I have for you. One is, what could the company, right, going back to Empire and Fox, what could the company have done beforehand? And so I did a little bit of research and said, okay, well, who were the executive producers? Who is the story written by or the show written by? So Brian Grazer, Danny Strom, Francie Calfo. Those are the executive producers for the show. And then it was written by Lee Daniels. And so the first question that or the first thought that always comes into my head is, if I can't see it, I can't solve for it. So how do they see what their risks are? And then how do they solve for them? The typical question that I ask any organization is, what constitutes a crisis for your company? Because what may work for company A may not work for company B. And so that's the first step that anyone wants to take, is identify what constitutes a crisis for us. Secondly, how do you gather your facts? What's your process on being able to do that? Because we can oftentimes jump and rush to have a comment or to have something to say, but if we don't have all of the correct facts, then we're not really setting ourselves up for success. So what I always like to do is I make a list of what is everything that I know without a shadow of a doubt right now, and I write it out. And then in the second column, I put, well, what's everything that I don't know? And then in the third column, it's, I don't know what I don't know. And how do we figure that out, right? So writing those things down, because when you get to that second column where you put, well, here's what I don't know, then that's the information that you need to be solving for, is how do you obtain the information so that you can better understand the things that you don't have answers to yet. After that, what I always recommend people in a crisis is assess, confirm, and communicate. Assess the situation. What happened? Talk to people. Do your research, right? In today's day and age, social media will tell your story before you get a chance to. So assess the situation. Confirm, but verify. Some people may say CYA. I call it cover your assets, right? Confirm, but verify. Understand what you're dealing with, but also confirm that you know that that's a fact, right? And then lastly, communicate. And that has to be done internally as well as externally. So the next question is, well, how can they recover? So the most important thing that I see from my perspective is there has to be transparency and truth. And that goes both from the Chicago Police Department as well as the TV show and the character who was on that particular show. To be honest, folks, they have some tough decisions that they're going to have to make, right? This has now put Jussie Smollett's personal career in a bit of a crisis, and he may be blackballed in the Hollywood scenes for a while. Who knows, right? But also Empire and Fox have some tough decisions that they're going to have to make. So my first question is, well, what's the strategy for that organization to support their reputation, their profitability, and their operations? Because in a crisis, that's really what those three things boil down to, right? My reputation, my profitability, and my operations. So what's the strategy to be able to move beyond this? Let's put that down on paper. What are all the things that they can imagine happening from this point going forward? Write those down. What are all of those things? Hey, my viewers may leave. People may boycott. People may protest. If we keep him or if we don't keep him, it may be a challenge, right? What are all the things that they cannot imagine happening? So in the middle of this crisis, what are the other things that they just absolutely, I cannot imagine these things happening to us right now? Put those on paper. The other thing that I would advise them to do, if it were in my shoes, right, are to identify who their stakeholders are and what they value. Because everybody values something different. So who are those key stakeholders that they have to make sure that they address? And then lastly, make a weighted pros and cons list. Once you get that information down on paper, you can physically see it and you can feel it. Write your pros and write your cons for your decisions, right? And weight them. I always weight them. Option 1 is weighted with the 1. Option 2 is weighted with the 2. Option 3 is weighted with the 3. And that way, as I write them down and I tally them up and my positives and my negatives, I can weigh and see, which one should I go with? Which one is tilting my scales? These are just kind of easy, very simple things that people can do and businesses to go back and take with you. And lastly, I always say, seek a trusted advisor. When I get sick, I am not the doctor. I go to the doctor. And in the world of crisis management, there are so many trusted advisors that you have at your fingertips. So go out, reach out to people that you can consult with and that you can have candid and transparent conversations with to help you through these challenges. The other thing that I'll say in terms of, well, what can they do to recover? When all else fails, go back to your core values. Who do you say you are? And operate in that truth. And your stakeholders and your customers will greatly appreciate you for that. The challenge is, to be honest, is there's a lot of fuzzy information in this case. And on one hand, the police department really has no credibility, right? Because of their own challenges and covering up a lot of things within the Chicago Police Department. And on the other hand of it, people are challenged with, well, do I believe or do I not believe the entire case with Mr. Smollett? So there's so many unknowns, and unless you personally know these people, it's hard for you to make a true decision, right? So I now pose a question to you. There's no right or wrong answer. What do you think? Crisis management is all about making the best decisions with the information that you have at that time. So I ask you, audience, those who are listening in, what do you think? What could they have done beforehand? How can they recover now? What would you like to see that you have not seen yet? Again, this is Vanessa Vaughn, the founder and chief resilience officer of Asfalis Advisors, and thank you for tuning in to the Crisis Corner Cafe.